Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 30 of So Says Shernoff. I'm Josh Shernoff, and yes, for 30 months we have brought you satire, scathing commentary, and a ton of sarcasm. Also, if I'm not mistaken, 30 different ties. But today, we bring you something else, something bigger. Because today, I welcome WWE Hall of Famer Eric Bischoff to the show. I can't wait for this conversation, but I'm going to anyway, because first, we need to jump into some headlines. The past month has been filled with a ton of headlines, but I would be remiss if I didn't talk about the headline that surrounded this show. So, last month, I kinda lost it in a Shernoff soapbox segment aimed at wrestling pundit and ethnic celebrity Dave Meltzer, seen here in front of his collection of mounted luchador heads. While Meltzer's famed work ethic got in the way of him having time to respond to my rant, many people found the time, from the good, like today's guest Eric Bischoff, tweeting, quote, "and I thought I was stiff," to this guy with the profile picture of Mike Tenay and Twitter handle of @PaulWhiteAEW, tweeting, "This effing no-name brings up Hana Kimura to try and generate buzz for his weird tangent about Dave Meltzer. Dude needs his ass beat." So it was a mixed bag. Actually, that's not true. Over 15,000 Twitter views and only 2 quote tweets were negative, and both mentioned Hana Kimura. So to put it into context, Hana Kimura was a Japanese pro wrestler and reality TV star who committed suicide after being taunted online and told to kill herself. Now, some people thought my bringing her up in relation to Dave Meltzer, telling people to please die if they complain about Kevin Kelly's announcing, was out of line. And if I offended anyone, I truly apologize, as that was not my intention. I did not bring her up to try and generate buzz. If anything, I take the subject of suggesting people die too seriously, to the point that it made me create a correlation between Dave's comments and her tragic death. So I want to make this as crystal clear as I can. Do I think Dave Meltzer legitimately wished harm on anyone? No. Do I think he was just trying to be funny and flippant? Yes. Do I think he should have apologized for what he tweeted and not just deleted it and then posted a bunch of comments defending himself? Yes. But again, I don't believe Meltzer wishes harm on anyone, and I certainly do not wish any harm on him. But my favorite part of all of this has got to be the message I got from someone asking how it was okay for me to give my opinion, saying, quote, "It's okay because you say so?" Yes. Yes, it is okay that I, Josh Shernoff, give my say-so on the show named So Says Shernoff. This entire show is named for the understanding that this is my opinion. Not Fight TV's, not my guests, not my friends, mine. And they are my opinions, they're not facts. Like any and every news source out there, and more importantly, like every satirical news source out there, we all have our narrative. Some, like myself, say what we believe to be true. Others say what someone pays them to say, or says what they think will be funny or get a rating. Go look at my YouTube numbers. Clearly, I don't do this for the ratings. At the end of the day, it's up to you, the viewer, to decide if your ideals and opinions match up with the person you're watching. And even then, it's okay to have a difference of opinion. Believe it or not, there are some things Meltzer and I actually agree on. We just don't agree on what's an appropriate height for a desk, or that joking about people dying is funny. So that's that. I am done talking about Meltzer. So let's see what else happened this month. Well, okay, here we are. Wrestling writer and casual racist Dave Meltzer went on his podcast and actually said the words, you know what, let's have a listen.
I thought when they left that something was going to happen. I thought
nope,
that,
they just left.
I thought that they were going to have gimmicked his car and
the wheels would fall off.
The wheels.
That actually would have been awesome.
I thought the wheel, because they're supposed to be like Puerto Rico. You know what I mean?
Yes, Dave. We all know what you mean. And while every fiber of my being wants to hop up on my soapbox and verbally castrate this xenophobic clown, instead, here's a cent's worth of advice for free. Stop putting your foot in your mouth before someone puts one in your ass. All right, that's it. We're done with talking about him. I'm sorry, what's that? He said, what now? Okay then, podcaster and star of the 1986 film Troll, Dave Meltzer, went on his little show and said that Charlotte Flair was suspended in storyline so she could go get dental work done, saying, quote, "She's just getting a complete makeover. That's just what happened. It's just one of those things. They make you real self-conscious about your looks when you're a woman in wrestling. It's just one of the negatives of it, but it's a reality of it." Charlotte fired back at Dave saying, "Yeah, I just listened and I thought Dave Meltzer would have learned his lesson last time commenting about women's bodies, but apparently I'm fair game. So I get to respond again to a rumor about my body again. You know what? This is when I stop. Dave, go to hell." She followed up with, "You have my phone number. It would take you 30 seconds to ask as opposed to giving straight crap to your listeners. Grow up. For you, of all people, to comment on a woman's looks, do you have any shame, decency, or professionalism left at all? Find a mirror. Look hard, Dave." Well, if I looked like, as Impact Wrestling star Moose put it, quote, "my vacuum cleaner bag when it's full," I'm not so sure I would be too eager to find a mirror either. So what more is there to say? Dave has his followers. He has the people who want to read his dirt, whether they think it's true or not. But to the rest of the wrestling world, I say this: join me over here on the right side of history. Dave Meltzer is a tiny, sad little man. He is a wrestling observer because he never had the balls to be a participant. Look, we are all Monday morning quarterbacks to something. It's human nature, and honestly, it's a part of fandom. But do not ever think that Dave Meltzer is just a fan. Maybe he once was, but now he is just an angry little troll yelling bullshit, sprinkled with the occasional fact, hoping that you fans will continue to look at him as the all-knowing wrestling prophet he wishes he was. And with that, we are done. Moving on from a dick to a cock. Peacock, that is. It's been reported that Peacock is currently reviewing over 17,000 hours of WWE content to ensure that it aligns with NBC Universal's standards and practices. Standards. Your app lists Keeping Up with the Kardashians as a featured channel. I would let go throwing around the word standards. Peacock has already edited several controversial segments from past WWE events, such as Vince McMahon using a racial slur during a backstage segment and DX imitating the Nation in blackface. Now, I don't know what's worse, the fact that 3 members of DX were in blackface, or that at the time, everybody thought the shot at Owen Hart's nose was the visual that went too far. In a recent New York Times article, NBC Universal and WWE gave the following statements about the edited content. NBC Universal saying, "Like with other shows on the Peacock platform, we are reviewing WWE content to ensure it aligns with Peacock standards and practices." WWE then got in front of the story saying, "We didn't know ECW came with a new jack when we bought it." Speaking of WWE and Peacock, WrestleMania finally returned in front of a live audience. Oh crap. Sorry, I'll have to talk about this a little later. Oh, that was short-lived. The Cesaro push of rainstorms. So this month, WWE released 10 superstars from their contracts, one of which was Mickie James. This past week, Mickie James shared this image on her social media of a trash bag that said Mickey on it inside the box it was shipped in. The contents of the trash bag were James' belongings, and she wrote, "Dear Vince McMahon, I'm not sure if you're aware, I did receive my WWE care package today. Thank you. Hashtag always blessed and grateful. Hashtag women's wrestling matters." Triple H, Johnny Ace, and Stephanie McMahon were among those who took to social media and apologized, taking the blame as a company and noting that the person responsible had been fired. But the response to WWE from fans was just a fascinating peek into the minds of some wrestling fans. Let's start with this guy who simply wrote, "Not enough." Not enough? Look, I'm Team Mickey on this one, but they fired the person. The hell do you want WWE to do? Beat up his family? Burn his house down? The only thing that would have been better would be if firing the responsible party freed up some room in the budget to bring back Mickie James. But then there was the guessing game that came with fans trying to figure out who done it. As in done it. As in Kevin Dunn. Yeah. People were guessing if Kevin Dunn or Bruce Pritchard were responsible. Now listen, I don't fully understand the day-to-day responsibilities of Bruce Pritchard or Kevin Dunn, but I just can't imagine they include cleaning out released talent's personal belongings from a drawer. We are talking about the two most powerful people in the company not named or married to a McMahon. And that's who you think was responsible for gathering Mickie James' belongings and mailing them to her? Apparently, WWE doesn't want you to know who was responsible, so in addition to letting the mystery person go, they let a handful of others go as well, presumably just to throw us all off the scent. Listen, hopefully this can be treated as a learning experience for WWE, and you have to give them credit for going on social media and diffusing the situation. Unfortunately, one day later, WWE tweeted this new ad for hefty trash bags, so lesson learned. Finally here, it recently came to my attention that Colt Boom Boom Cabana has taken exception to the fact that my ring announcer character in the new Retro Mania video game announces him as being from Chicago, Illinois, as opposed to his preferred Maxwell Street. A fan tweeted at me these videos.
From Chicago, Illinois, Colt Boom Boom.
It's Maxwell Street, you prick. Oh, we're in a cage?
The following
I don't have time for Josh to f this up.
Now, Colt and I have known each other for almost 15 years, and I in no way would want this to negatively affect our acquaintanceship. When he appears as a fireman on Chicago PD, I want to be able to name drop him to family and friends. So I would like to set the record straight right now to Colt Cabana from Maxwell Street. What happened was this. I was given a script. I read the script word for word into a recording device. That recording was then sent to Retromania and placed in the game because that's how voiceovers work. I don't get to make up however I want to announce somebody to the ring. Otherwise, instead of from Pepperland, I would have announced the Blue Meanie as being from the hit podcast Mind of the Meanie with the handsomest co-host in the history of podcasts, a podcast that can be downloaded every Monday morning wherever you listen to your podcast. But instead, I said from Pepperland because that's what was in the script. Just like how Chicago, Illinois was in the script to announce Colt Cabana, who, for the record, is from Maxwell Street. So Colt, I apologize. I am sorry if my words in this video game have affected your ability to enjoy playing with yourself on Twitch. The good news, however, is that prior to this fan bringing Colt's disappointment to my attention, I had already re-recorded his entrance, I assume for a downloadable update. And that's really the best I can do because unlike what that fan may think, I'm not physically in the game. That's right, the fan said, quote, "Stop announcing him wrong." As though I am just sitting inside a game console somewhere waiting to be told to announce someone to the ring. It's a recording, and again, I have, quote, stopped announcing him wrong, but it may take a minute to get the update. So in the meantime, Colt, this is for you. From Maxwell Street, Colt Boom Boom Cabana! So until the game is updated, I hope you will find that recording right there to be sufficient. Oh, and when you get a chance, you should update your profile. When we return, Eric Bischoff. We'll be right back. From the hit podcast Mind the Meanie comes the brand new Mind of the Meanie action figures by Cella Toys. A 2-pack featuring former WWE superstar and ECW original, the Blue Meanie, and his Mind of the Meanie co-host Josh Shernoff with removable microphone. These figures feature 3 points of articulation and incredible likenesses. These retro-style figures can be purchased outside the U.S. at cellatoys.net and inside the U.S. over at mindofthemeanie.com. With only 1,000 made, this collectible 2-pack won't be around for long, so pre-order now. The Mind of the Meanie action figures by Cella Toys. Order now. Welcome back to the show. My guest is arguably the biggest guest we have ever had on So Says Shernoff, and we have had some big ones. But today, we have a first ballot WWE Hall of Famer from the show 83 Weeks on adfreeshows.com, a man of great experience and even better hair. Please welcome Mr. Eric Bischoff. Eric, thank you so much for being here.
Hey, it's always great. Sorry about that. It's always great to be with you, Josh. And I may have to give up the hair title, man. You got a pretty good head of hair going on there, brother. And you're balancing it out with the beard, and you got it all going on.
The beard is just to be more like Conrad, and the hair is all CGI'd. So, but I appreciate that. Yeah.
Good for you.
Before we get started, I want to say you have a reputation on your show of going into the weeds, as it's been said. Fans of this show or the Mind of the Meanie podcast or anyone who's ever spoken to me knows that I am one of the most long-winded people. So I know we're planning maybe a 10, 15 minutes, but I'm going to ask the good people at Fight TV to block off about 3 hours just in case, because between the two of us, this could go on a while.
You never know.
But no, I am super excited to have you on the show. And before we talk about anything else, congratulations on a well-deserved Hall of Fame induction. I think it's just awesome that you're finally in the Hall of Fame.
Well, thank you very, very much. First of all, it's really quite an honor. It affected me positively, much more than I thought it would. I always thought, wow, that'd be kind of cool, and it'd be an honor. And I recognize it, I guess, intellectually, but until it happens and you actually are standing up there and you realize that, the people that came before you that are part of the WWE Hall of Fame are so important. And just to be invited to that party is pretty damn cool.
Talking about the actual Hall of Fame itself, we've heard a lot of people talk about the recording process. I think Sean Waltman had said something about how there were multiple takes for him. What was that like? Were you playing just to the camera, or was it just a giant empty room, or were there other people there watching you when you were giving your speech?
Well, there was certainly a fair number of production people there. It was a pretty significant production. There were virtual fans there that were reacting, and you had that ambient kind of energy and feel to it. It wasn't the same as real people. It's just not. But it also didn't feel like you're standing up there in an empty room either. So for me, in my head, I've learned over the years to always feel like I'm playing to a big room, when I need to. In other words, I can play to a very small crowd and give the same type of performance or the same type of passion or feeling that I would in a 20,000 seat arena. Now, the feeling on my end is a little bit different, but I think, I'm pretty comfortable in the environment that I was in. And it was different. Of course it was different, but it wasn't so bad for me. I don't know why.
Well, I was also curious about it because I've been to, I want to say 2 Hall of Fames. I know you've been to a number of them. There's nothing like having the live audience there, having that, the WWE universe, all the fans cheering you and giving back to you. But at the same time, I remember one specifically where Trish Stratus thanked her husband and everybody booed because I guess they were disappointed that she is married. But I think that, I'm just as a fan looking at it, it seems like WWE may be enjoying the fact that they can kind of keep things like that from happening. Was that something that maybe looking back on it, you're kind of glad, like, hey, not that you were going to get booed. I think everybody appreciates your wife, Mrs. B. But, Do you think that that's something that
Wait a minute. You think the only reason I wasn't going to get booed is because the fans like my wife, Mrs. B?
I think there are definitely people, I know one specifically over at Ad Free Shows, that could have very well booed you, for mentioning your wife. But
who is that? Who is that cretin? I want to know that cretin's name. I'll have
Paul.
my way with that dog.
Hey, you talk 83 weeks, we're talking about Ad Free Shows, 83 weeks. You talk a lot about the business side of the business, or maybe I should say that the corporate side of WCW. For years, you were just an on-air character in WWE, but now you're probably one of, if not the only person I can think of, who had a hand in some form of creative direction for WCW, WWE, and TNA, now Impact Wrestling. Times change, obviously. Presentation is different in all of those companies, but what's one recurring theme to the creative process that you had for all of those places, especially when they're presenting such different products?
I'm not sure I understand the question. If I do correctly, what was the one kind of go-to formula or tendency that I had creatively when I was, in TNA and WCW and WWE? Is that right?
Yeah, pretty much that. I mean, or possibly even the fact that since they're so different, maybe you did you ever show up to one of them and say, okay, I got to throw the rule book out. I can't do what I did in this previous place and I have to come up with something new? Or was there kind of that roadmap that you personally have creatively that you could always go back to?
No, I think okay, now I understand the question and I think I can do a decent job with it. When I first, I didn't really stick my toe in the water and creative until Nitro came along. And in the beginning, I was smart enough to know what I didn't know and allowed the people who did have more experience in booking or writing or producing wrestling in terms of matches, I pretty much let them have the loudest voices in the room. Mm-hmm. And then gradually, as I became more and more comfortable, and especially into 96, when I got much more involved, I started gaining my confidence. And around that same time, I kind of zeroed in on a formula. And it was born out of a newspaper article that I read. Dick Ebersol was being interviewed in terms of what he was going to do to improve the audience for the Summer Olympics. And one of the things that I took away was formula. Ebersol talked about, making sure we're not just covering the sport, but we're telling the story, bringing reality into it, creating anticipation in all of the Olympic sports. I thought, well, wow, a lot of that applies to what I do. And I had to tweak that formula a little bit, and I did. And I came up with a formula that I've referred to 100,000 times as SARSA, the acronym: story, anticipation, reality, surprise, and action. And throughout my career, to varying degrees, certainly in WCW to a large degree, because I was in control of my own destiny there for a long time, into TNA, once I really started getting involved in booking across the boards. And then I attempted to in WWE. I just wasn't there long enough to pull it off. But I've always believed that no matter what, I don't care how wrestling changes, how the audience change, how many streaming platforms come along, how many people watch their shit on their phone. I don't care, because at the core of why people watch what they watch on whatever device they're going to watch it on is story, anticipation, reality, surprise, action. If you can combine those elements in any content across any platform, in any generation of audience, you're going to likely be very successful. And I learned that the hard way. I learned it on the job. I learned it by trial and error.
Sure.
And kind of fine-tuned it in WCW in 96, 97, 98. And then, applied it pretty effectively in TNA for probably a year and a half or 2 years when I really had my fingers in the pie, so to speak. But I still believe it's a formula that will work across the boards to this day. Once somebody understands, it's easy to understand the acronym. Yeah, story, anticipation, real. Okay, yeah, I get that. But creating a formula, a very specific formula with a blueprint that allows you to make sure at every stage in a story you have sufficient quantities of whatever it is you're trying to achieve on that checklist, that's the art. It's not as easy as it sounds. It takes art, an artistic, perspective of storytelling, and it takes an understanding of the audience and what's worked in the past and what hasn't, all that other stuff. But I still believe that formula is more applicable today than it's ever been.
Do you think that obviously, the internet wrestling community and everybody is a genius when they're watching on TV?
Or a journalist.
Oh, we'll get to that.
Cosplay journalism. It's, they're they self-identify as journalists. I've gotten a kick out of that lately. I've seen a couple people acknowledge themselves as being journalists. I went, wait a minute. You're a freaking journalist.
So I made it very clear when I started doing this that this is a satirical news show because I don't want anybody accusing me of thinking I'm a journalist.
It is. In this, words are funny things, right? People use them. Like certain. I'm not going to mention names. I don't want to do that, but it's Sunday. But in my journalism career, I've always done. Well, wait a minute, you've never been a journalist, man. You write a freaking blog, for crying out loud. That doesn't make you a journalist. And I think they just start self-identifying. Like I got my pilot's license, a couple decades ago. I didn't walk around telling everybody I was an astronaut.
Because you've gone slightly off the ground, therefore, might as well have been.
Anyway, I digress. Yeah. I go into the weeds.
That's fine. We're happy to be here in the weeds with you. So what I'm saying is that everybody does think they know everything. And one of the critiques you'll always see if you kind of, fall down that rabbit hole of looking at comments on things is people thinking that if they watch something, be it WWE, AEW, whoever, they'll look at it and go, lazy booking, or they didn't care. Or have you seen instances where people, maybe even well-meaning, have said, just put that out there. Just have that match. We know fans are going to hate it, but just throw it out because we need to move on to the next thing.
No.
Or are we always trying here?
I've never seen that. I've never been in a room with anyone that I suspected may deep down inside even feel that way. So count me on the definitive hell no side of that equation. It's silliness. It's
that's good to hear.
Narrative by people who couldn't find their ass with both hands in a GPS when it comes to what they really know about the industry. Now, they may not like what they see, and they may feel like it. I mean, I feel that way too sometimes when I watch some of my favorite series on television. I'll see an episode and I go, "Oh man, did everybody was everybody just call it in that week?" But what you don't know, and this is the fascinating thing about really the core of your question, is people don't know what's really going on behind the scenes. If there's a storyline that's just feels like it's flat, or an episode, one part of a storyline that just feels like, oh man, that was horrible. Why did they do that? Nobody cares. They just phone that in. They're lazy. Well, you don't know what was going on behind the scenes. You don't know what was happening with that talent. You don't know what the challenges were, in terms of what they want to do going forward, or what is possibly being set up 30, 60, 90 days from now in some cases. I have seen that. I have seen perfectly good storylines that everybody had been excited about for weeks, in some cases months, become unwound at the last minute because of variables that nobody could have predicted. Whether they be creative variables that someone determined for whatever reason, right or wrong, was perhaps a better option, either shortly down the road or perhaps 3 or 4 or 5, 6 months down the road. I've seen it happen dozens and dozens of times. I've been involved with it myself. It happens. But to ascribe that to laziness or just not caring is the reflections of the ignorant.
Do you ever find it interesting? I'm just thinking about this while you're talking about that. Do you ever find it interesting that people, because this has happened a lot in your career, the same people will talk about, oh, you killed this, you killed that. And then in the next breath, they'll talk about the genius you are, this person, not necessarily even you specifically, but the genius you are. And oh, man, well, they created this, they did that. Do you ever look at it and just, I don't even know where I'm going with this, but look at it, it's kind of ridiculous if you really look at the idea that people, they like to say if something's good, they'll maybe, like Triple H. People hated Triple H forever. Oh, he's killing storylines. He's doing this. Starts NXT. They love the product NXT. Triple H is the greatest thing in the entire world. Why doesn't he bump this one out or bump that one out? Eric Bischoff, or Paul Heyman, we don't, this thing, they killed this or killed that. Oh, Eric Bischoff and Paul Heyman are coming. They're going to save the day. Same thing with Bruce Pritchard. Do you ever think that people either give way too much credit, not enough credit, or both, or just, again, going back to what you said, have absolutely no idea how the entire world works behind the scenes?
It's a lot of everything. In the first place, I think social media, and when I say social media, whether it's Twitter or Facebook or Reddit or chat rooms or whatever it may be, people like to express opinions. People like to argue. People like their opinions to be recognized and liked and retweeted. People crave attention. And oftentimes when people are desperate, and I think sometimes people are, in fact, I know it. I made the mistake recently of downloading the TikTok app because I kept hearing about TikTok. And and believe me, I know we're going to the weeds, but this is going to come full circle and it's going to make my point. So I made the mistake one day of going to TikTok, and I'm scrolling because everybody's on it. And I keep hearing about it, and there's some celebrities I know that are using it effectively to kind of help grow their brand. So I'm going to check this out, and I'm scrolling through this thing, and I was mortified. Now I am no prude, mind you. I have a whole village of skeletons in my closet. All right, I've lived a great, interesting life that I'm proud of in some ways. But I was shocked at what I was seeing young women, men doing on video for what? I mean, I've never seen people degrade themselves or make such asses of themselves for no other reason than to get noticed. Now, I think some of the stuff that I was seeing, it was so graphic, I won't even, I'm not even going to talk about it because I feel creepy. But I think the same thing is true when people are talking about wrestling sometimes. That need for attention. And if the flow of a conversation, a social media conversation is, I hate Eric Bischoff, he ruined WCW, then you'll have a whole bunch of people wanting to chime in on that because that's what everybody's chiming in on. And they're going to kind of outdo each other in terms of, the ridiculous shit that they want to say. And then if another room is a different room, that same person may take on a whole different personality or perspective for the very same reasons. So I just think social media as a whole is pretty toxic unless you've really learned to filter out the silliness and certainly not to let any of it affect you, for God's sake. I feel bad for young parents who have real young kids and teens and preteens, seeing the stuff that's out there and available and what otherwise normal people, would seem like they're normal people are doing just to get attention. It's kind of weird.
Yeah, my oldest is 6 and my youngest is 10 months, and I am scared to death of what social
you can't stop
gonna...
it. You can't keep it away from them. You can try. You can attempt to try, but in reality, this stuff is, it's like they used to try to keep Playboy magazines away from us kids too. That didn't work.
Somehow found it. Yep.
You always find it, right? It's the same thing.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about, I mentioned very briefly AEW when we were talking before. You've been on their shows a few times as Eric B. from Cody, Wyoming. Do you see a future for yourself? You've talked before about how, you coming back as an on-air character, how it would be exciting for, the first week and the second week. And then by the third week, it's a little less. And then people are like, we've seen this before. But being backstage there, have you ever thought about the idea of being a producer, I know that's what they have, their coaches, people who help put stories together in matches. Is that something for a company like that, or really any other company that you, at this stage in your career, see yourself possibly getting back into again?
I struggle with that, because there is a part of me that still misses the creative process.
Sure.
When you're sitting in a room and somehow, someone, some way, an idea germinates and people get excited about it. You can feel the energy in the room start to shift. People sit up in their chairs a little higher. They're focused now. They're not looking at their phones because everybody realizes, hey, there's something here we could maybe make work. When you go into, and I've done this thousands and thousands of hours experiencing this type of a scene where you're in a room and no matter how hard you try and the ideas are flowing, but nothing's working. Everybody's trying. It's just not working. You're not finding it. You're not finding that. It's like, trying to strum a guitar and hit the perfect note at the perfect time. And I've been in the room for hours and hours and hours when nothing's happening. And you try to artificially stimulate it. I say, okay, let's break. Let's go out and go walk around for a while. Let's go grab lunch or whatever and come back in an hour and see if we can have a fresh look. Nothing. That's a real tough way to make a living. Doesn't sound like it, but it is. And conversely, the other side of that is when you're sitting in that room and you've spent an hour or two or three and you're starting to feel like, oh man, it's just not coming. It's not coming. It's not coming. And then somebody comes up with that idea. And in that moment, all of a sudden, everybody starts doing this. Hey, well, and what if I like that? And, he could do this or she could do that. And watching that, what was just a simple idea, maybe even a simple sentence, which was the beginning of an idea, all of a sudden takes on a life. It gets a pulse. Not a pulse you can see, but a pulse you can feel. And everybody's feeling it at the same time. That is a rush. And I miss that a lot. Now, I've also come to realize, and I think my last run in WWE was what made me realize it, I am not willing to give up as much of my life as would probably be required to really submerge myself in that process. It's not a part-time job. It's not even a full-time job. It's 2 full-time jobs. Because when you're not doing it, you're thinking about it. And when you're not thinking about it, you're dreaming about it, which is kind of like thinking about it, only worse because it really doesn't help you sleep because you wake up in the middle of the night. I'm not there, I'm pretty happy with what I got going on, but I do miss that. Could I see it actually happening? Maybe a version of it. And I don't know how that would work because I'm a firm believer that you've got to really be immersed in the process exactly because of what we just first talked about. Because if you don't know everything that's going on behind the scenes, if you don't have a really good understanding of the direction of the company, the vision of the company, the goals of the network the company's on, all of those are things that only people behind the scenes are aware of.
Right.
And to try to contribute to a company without having all of that data and that feel is probably a waste of time. So just recognizing that, I'm kind of struggling with the fact that, I really would like to, but I also know I probably couldn't. As far as performing, I'm really thrilled just to pop up every now and then, get that little fix, see that red light on that camera, have a little fun, get my heat, and go home. I'm pretty cool with that.
Speaking of heat, we need to talk about one thing before we go here. It is a tweet that you sent out last month that definitely changed my life. So I kind of went off on friend of a show, not either of our shows, but friend of a show, I'd assume, Dave Meltzer. I tweeted a clip out about him and some of the things he'd said and whatnot. You retweeted it saying, quote, "and I thought I was stiff." And your tweet brought about 15,000 new eyes to my show, so thank you for that. But it's funny, like a year ago, I did a much calmer piece on him and his inconsistency of start ratings, and I actually think it was an even better piece. But the one everyone saw, I wanted to, A, as I did before, thank you for the retweet, but B, you've been dealing with him a lot longer than I have, and I find myself on this show that I do here having to talk about just certain things in the news, and he continuously comes up with something else. So I guess my real question is, why is he the way he is, and how can we fix this?
Well, we can't fix anything, and I don't think he even recognizes that he should fix something or needs to. So there's the answer to those two questions. In terms of why is he the way he is, I don't know. I'm not a psychiatrist or anything like that. I don't try to be. And I only know what I know based on my life experience, but my experience, my instinct tells me it's not knowledge. It's just a feeling. My instinct tells me that he's got some issues and some real needs. And unfortunately, it manifests itself in a way that I don't think he means to do it, but he's hurting the business that he's, has built so much of his career convincing people he loves so much. He's hurting it. And what's worse than that, because the business is strong, the business will survive 100 Dave Meltzers. Always has. Phil Mushnick was another one long before Dave Meltzer became a pain in the ass. There are people that just want to rip things down and be critical. And in the case of Meltzer, and I've called him out, it's been proven, it's well documented. A lot of the stuff he presents as facts are just stuff he makes up in his mind. And unfortunately, people believe it as fact because it's in print. It's Dave Meltzer. Well, therefore, it must be true. And it's not. But he's hurting individuals. He's hurting people and hurting careers. And he's got his favorites. He's got his people that he'll always try to protect because, he knows he's got enough influence over a small but loud audience that will populate the internet with Dave Meltzerisms and perspectives. So he likes to wield that and use that sometimes to influence. But, hopefully people will just start seeing the pattern, and people that are being influenced by Dave will start recognizing that the guy's got needs and issues. I just don't know what they are.
Last question I have for you here, and then I'll let you go. You said at the end of your Hall of Fame speech that the best was yet to come. Obviously, 83 Weeks continues to knock it out of the park every week. And again, if people haven't watched it now, you can watch it over at adfreeshows.com. If you haven't listened to it, go download it. If you ever loved wrestling in the 90s or the 80s even, or even today, just check it out. But what else is next for you? We talked about a little bit of the idea of a producer or whatever, but you have done so much, and not just to blow smoke here, but you have done so much in this business, behind the scenes, in front of the camera. What mountain, be it in this business or just in life in general, have you yet to climb that you kind of have your eyes set on?
A lot of the goals that I have right now are more personal than professional. It's kind of where my focus is at. That's not to say that I'm, hey, I still need to make money, brother. I've made a lot and I've spent a lot. So I plan on making a whole lot more and spending a whole lot more. So I'm still really active, but my goal right now is to be successful in the projects that I'm passionate about. And I have a couple. I've got a collectible card game strategy that I've been developing with a team of really, really smart people who know a lot about that world. And we've developed a business plan or started reaching out to some people and potential partners and things like that. I'm very excited about that. But that's something that's a kind of a down low kind of project. It doesn't involve me standing up in front of a camera. It doesn't involve me running a wrestling company. It's a really creative, smart project with a great team of people, and I'm very, very excited about that. The movie's coming out eventually once this COVID thing finally settles down to the point where you can actually go into full scale production. A hell of a movie. Chris Hemsworth playing Hulk Hogan, Todd Phillips, the director of The Joker, Scott Silver, one of the writers of The Joker, along with Todd Phillips. You got a pretty hefty team of people on that project and on the film, and I'm happy to be associated with that. I'm excited for that, but that's down the road. Nobody knows when that's going to happen or not. I'm working more and more closely with Conrad every day, and I'm really enjoying that. That scratches all my entrepreneurial itches. It's challenging for me in ways that are new and different. So I'm really excited about some of the things that Conrad and I have going on beyond 83 weeks. That's just one of probably half a dozen.
Well, I cannot thank you enough for taking the time to talk with me today. The show is 83 weeks, and you can download that wherever you get your podcasts or listen to it and watch it early and ad-free over at adfreeshows.com. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Eric Bischoff, thank you so much.
Hey, Josh, could you do me one favor?
Yes.
Could you tweet something just ballistic
Yes.
about Dave Meltzer so I can retweet it?
Absolutely. And it will probably have a link to this show in it. So
All right.
thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Talk to you later.
From the hit podcast Mind of the Meanie comes the brand new Mind of the Meanie action figures by Cella Toys. A 2-pack featuring former WWE superstar and ECW original, the Blue Meanie, and his Mind of the Meanie co-host Josh Shernoff with removable microphone. These figures feature 3 points of articulation and incredible likenesses. These retro-style figures can be purchased outside the U.S. at cellatoys.net and inside the U.S. over at mindofthemeanie.com. With only 1,000 made, this collectible 2-pack won't be around for long, so pre-order now. The Mind of the Meanie action figures by Cella Toys. Order now. That's our show. Thank you to my guest, Eric Bischoff, and thank you to all of you, my viewers, who have supported me and this sometimes ridiculous show for 30 months. We are just getting started here. Make sure to follow me on social media at So Says Shernoff and at Shernoff Show. Subscribe to my YouTube channel, youtube.com/So Says Shernoff. Hit like, hit subscribe, and hit that little bell. And don't forget to visit mindofthemeanie.com to pick up the new Mind of the Meanie action figures. That's right, I have an action figure. Bring the excitement of So Says Shernoff to your home with me. Have me interview the Blue Meanie, or just put on your own Mind of the Meanie podcast. The choice is yours. Play with me, won't you? That's all for us here. Until next month, this has been So Says Shernoff, because that is what Shernoff had to say. Bye, everyone.